Okay, I give another 1 more minute. Please scan your attendance. Okay, so today basically we continue our lecture after midterm break or Raya break. So basically, more or less, we're going to have about 5 weeks to complete this course. I think we actually on the right track to cover everything under the subject. In particular, those chapters that are going to be covered in final exam, just 1 or 2 more that I need to cover. And then after that, you actually need to focus to complete the group assignment, which is very important. So I really hope that all the group basically have started to conduct the interview and start to make the analysis. And in case you need any kind of opinions, so please let me know. At least I know that you actually on the right track. So any question or any kind of thing that you want to share with regard to your group project? Macam mana group project you all? Is it basically everyone okay? How, because I believe that before Hari Raya, before Raya break, basically some of the group have started to interview, right? To conduct the interview. Am I right? Betul kan? Hazel group dah start interview, right? So that means you have an ample time to do this kind of analysis. And then not only you just need to refer to the interview transcript, but at the same time, you also need to find any news, okay, any kind of sources that you can get from the company. For example, company report, perhaps you look at the website, you look at their, what we call it, social media to get the information. Okay, so far macam mana? Any problem with regard to your group project? Ada masalah ke? You want to share anything?
Alhamdulillah doktor, kami dah buat interview semalam.
Oh, semalam. Okay, so how's it going?
Group 2.
No, what I mean, macam mana interview tu? Okay.
Okay doktor, but any information yang di luar kita punya scope of question yang kita tanya, kita boleh keep contact that person in charge lah.
That's good. Okay, one of the things that perhaps you need to alert when you conducted the interview and then you're still missing some information, I would recommend you to call the person in charge for you to get the required information lah. Okay, today basically I'm going to cover another chapter. I actually just purposely not cover yet chapter 8 and 9. Chapter 8 and 9 basically related with patent, copyright, what else? Trade secret. Okay. So all of these basically, I'm going to cover that kind of what we call it chapters roughly, simply because more or less supposedly you have learned at other subject. You faham eh? Sebab for example, when we talk about patents, basically you have learned about patent as one of the IP, okay, under few subject. Betul kan? You dah have you taken IP law and management subject? Dah ambil belum?
Yes, doctor. Dah ambil.
So most probably I just want to cover a bit lah. I believe that some of the subject have covered that kind of things. Okay, but for now, we actually want to cover chapter 10. So let me give you what basically the scenario or the main content for chapter 10. Okay, so I'm going to share the slide first. Okay, so chapter 10 is capturing value from innovation. So this is where we're going to discuss with regard to what are other kind of non-contractual strategies, or perhaps beside this kind of legal, what we call it, protection that normally companies do in order to protect their innovation. So what are other things that they should do in order to protect their innovation? What the meaning of capturing value from innovation? That means they want to make sure that they can deter this kind of imitation from the, what we call it, from the competitors. Even you need to remember, when it comes to the patent normally going to be what we call it, effective for how many years? Kalau you ada patent, berapa tahun dia akan bertahan? Guys, do you know that?
10 years.
Is it 10 years? How many years? Because patent is actually, yes, 20 years. Okay, so that's actually based on I believe that in Malaysia Patent Act 1983, and then kita ada trademark, and then kita ada copyright. So all of that, even though the slide that we have basically based on American context, but when we try to look from Malaysia context, we have our own Copyright Act, we have our own Patent Act, even if I'm not mistaken, Copyrighted Act just been reviewed recently. Okay, so a lot of things basically has been taken into consideration. For example, when we talk about copyright, so you must remember, whenever that you actually want to use this kind of copyrighted things, you need to pay royalties. So kalau royalties tu, contohnya kalau you buat lagu, sampai bila you actually can receive royalty? Hello? From Malaysia Act. For example, you have some kind of, literature work. And then after that, you actually, someone want to use your copyrighted work. So for how long basically you going to receive this kind of royalty? As simple as when we're talking with regard to lagu, berapa lama royalty tu you akan dapat? How long basically you're going to get the royalty from your what we call it, from the lyric of your song, for example, the one that you wrote, for example.
70 years until the author's death.
70 years, okay.
Copyright.
Other than that, yeah, so basically you need to check. I believe it's like 50 years after the death of the owner lah. So that means, for example, if you actually pass away, so your family basically can still claim royalties. So that's how it works, okay? But when it comes to the current context, okay, we must remember, not everything basically can be fully effective by using this kind of legal framework. Some of the strategies basically need to be done by the companies in order to deter, in order to prevent the imitation from the competitors, particularly when it comes to the advancement of technology. So that's the reason why whenever you actually go into this kind of what we call it business, particularly when you introduce innovation to the customers, so how are you going to make sure that whenever you actually do this kind of investment for the innovation, you're going to receive this kind of ROI. Okay, so that's actually the main aspect for chapter 10. Chapter 10, or this chapter, focusing on what are other strategies that need to be taken by the companies, particularly tech-based companies, in order to deter this kind of imitation or perhaps competition. Okay, so and we actually want to define appropriability. Okay, so that means when we talk about appropriability, so this is where we want to look with regard to how we actually want to make sure that whatever investment that we have taken for the innovation, we can take it, and we want to deter this kind of imitation, and explain why most innovation are easy to imitate. Okay, understand when and how controlling a key resources which allow you to appropriate the return of investment or return to innovation. So basically, for number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, so this is actually refer to the strategies that should be taken by the companies in order to make sure that they get the appropriate return to innovation. So this is what we call as appropriability. Okay, in the context of you actually get what you expected from your innovation or R&D. Okay, so there are few ways. For example, here, just baca dia punya, just actually look at the keywords controlling resources, and then you also need to gain economic of scale. I think has been discussed previously as well. And then how you actually need to understand when and how moving up the learning curve. This is another aspect that means the company need to make sure that they keep on learning. And through this kind of learning, activities, they're going to come up with something with an innovation product, okay, innovative product. And then I explain when and how establishing a reputation. So this is another part. For example, in running this kind of innovation project, you must at the same time build up your own reputation. So for example, for instance, we know that certain companies, they might have certain reputation for certain product. For example, when we talk about processor, okay, computer processor, what is actually in your mind? When I actually ask you, which company basically have the most reputable position in terms of processor product, computer processor product? Which company, guys?
Intel.
Yeah, it's Intel. That's basically in your mind. Okay. Or secondly, as simple as, for example, when I ask you, baby diapers, contoh baby diapers, normally which company that cross in your mind? Baby diapers ni. Guys?
Mami Poco.
Mami Poco, what else? Pampers. Contoh saya nak dengan Pampers sebenarnya. Okay. Many of us simply call Pampers. Pampers basically a brand. But in Malaysia, Pampers tak ada sebenarnya. Like Hazel said, Hazel very alert lah. Basically, Mami Poco one of the reputable brand because mahal. Okay. The price is very costly when you buy Mami Poco. But Pampers is actually has this kind of reputation even though Pampers is basically not exist anymore in Malaysia lah. So that's I want to say that reputation play important part. So whenever we think about a product, we might actually try to associate the brand or the reputation with one of the most prominent company. As simple as when we talk about instant noodle. So normally you're going to say Maggi, betul ya? Okay, you're going to say about Maggi. Okay. Okay, so this actually reputation play an important part as well in order to deter the imitation from the competitors. And then you also need to understand when and how obtaining architectural control will allow you to appropriate the return to innovation. So this is actually with regard to the key processes involved by the company. How they basically control, for example, complementary asset as well as other kind of product that basically become the supplementary product for the company lah. Okay. And then we're also going to explain when being a first mover is advantage and disadvantage. I believe that this is actually understandable because benda ni kita tahu in the business sometimes it's good you actually can become the first mover, but it's not all the time that you actually can gain advantage by becoming a first mover. Okay. And then understand the role of complementary asset in appropriating the return to innovation. Saya lagi ni. Okay, ada. Okay. So basically number 9, with regard to number 9, if possible, I also want to cover one of the model where we actually want to look in terms of, first we're going to see in terms of how effective the pattern in a certain industry, because not every industry basically will be protected by IP, even though maybe okay you can go for IP, but when it comes to the reality of doing the business, IP is not really effective. Okay, we want to see in that context. And then secondly, we also want to look in terms of what we call it, in terms of technical standard or dominant design. This is another aspect that basically going to shape whether you want to be an innovator or imitators. So when you actually go into this kind of business, you're going to see whether there is a technical standard has been established or not. Okay, so by looking in terms of this, so you're going to decide, okay, whether you want to become innovator or imitator. That's another part, because sometimes when the technical standard has been established, so it's very dominant, so it's good for you to just become imitator, because you just need to follow the technical standard, unless if it's actually something that not in place yet. So this is where you need to use this kind of opportunity, become the innovator, okay, become the first mover to introduce the product, or perhaps the one that actually have this establish the technical standard. And eventually we also want to look in terms of complementary asset. To what extent you basically control other kind of things to make sure that some of the aspect basically could help you to become the innovator, or perhaps to become the innovator. Okay, so this is where we talk about a probability mechanism. Okay, as I mentioned, companies need to do imitation. We need to admit, okay, not all the time basically our product become the dominant design. Okay, someone might follow our steps. That's actually quite a norm. I think as simple as when you selling nasi lemak, even by selling nasi lemak pun basically you're going to what we call it involved with this kind of imitation. Give me 30 seconds, wait for a while. Okay, sorry, I have an important call. Okay, so basically, here we actually want to look from the perspective of non-legal barriers to imitation available. Okay, this is where, as I mentioned before, all this while we have learned. Okay, in your mind, whenever you want to protect your innovation, you must go through this kind of contractual mode. So that means using the legal barriers lah. So that means whether you go for patents, you go for trademark, you go for copyright. However, this kind of thing maybe takes some time, okay? And perhaps after you waited for 1 or 2 years, unfortunately, you couldn't get or obtain the approval. So that's why if you look here, legal barriers cannot always be obtained, because you need to go through a very tedious process. As simple as you need to what we call it, the moment, for example, the moment you register for the patent, so the patent examiner is going to check, okay, check the existence of your product. They're going to actually go to for database, and then perhaps they're going to ask you what basically the novelty of your innovation, and it definitely takes some time. Okay, so that means it's not immediately, because some of them, especially when it comes to certain aspect, it might take ages lah. Memang saya pernah tengok ada satu tu 3-4 tahun, 5 tahun baru dapat, dia sampai terlupa. This one lecturer basically he sent for patent, and after 5 or 6 years baru dia dapat, and he's totally not interested to develop that innovation anymore. Okay, because it took ages. Okay, and then often more effective than legal barriers at at certain circumstances, perhaps by using this kind of non-legal barriers sometimes more effective than having this kind of legal barriers. Okay, especially like I said, when the product is easily imitated, one part, and perhaps the advancement of technology change very rapidly. So that's the reason why you cannot wait, because sending your application to patent is good, especially when you want to establish a reputation. However, sometimes due to the time, you need to race with the time. So that's the reason why eventually it's become not really effective. Okay, and they're going to say as well, legal and non-legal barriers are not mutually exclusive. So it's good, even though you have submitted your application to the what we call it for the IP protection, but it's good if you also take consideration to use this kind of non-legal barriers. Okay, degree of legal protection is of uncertain value in some field, correct? Okay, because like certain industry or sectors, they're not really value much when it comes come to the legal protection. And then finally, technological change has weakened the value of legal barrier in some industry. I think this has been discussed just now. So in order for us, we actually understand this kind of limitation. If you look here, this is some of the limitation why the legal barriers that we mentioned just now is not really effective. So as a technology strategist, you also need to employ non-legal mechanisms. So that means non-legal strategies. For example, this one, controlling key resources, exploiting economy of scale, moving up the learning curve, building a brand name reputation, establishing architectural control, and last but not least, being the first mover. So our discussion for today, we're going to focus on these 6 key aspects, okay? What are other strategies that you or other companies can adopt in order for them to protect their innovation and eventually get the appropriate return to investment in innovation, okay? Because we must remember when we talk about investment in innovation, that means your R&D expenditure, and then perhaps you actually employ or outsource it to the other people, to the certain programmers or to certain scientists. So all of this need to be taken into consideration. We do not want to become the waste. Okay, so effective of barriers limitation. If you look here, not everything basically effective. This is based on the previous study lah. When they look at it, when we talk about products, so through the patent, for example, they're going to say that just 35% basically effective. Okay, and then most of the time it's about lead time. Lead time, that means how fast basically you go into the business, and then you are the first one in the in the industry. Okay, so that's why we need to actually look in terms of how this kind of thing is effective at certain aspect and how it's not really effective at other aspect. Okay, for example, when we talk about trade secret, if you look here, I believe that trade secret or secrecy is the most what we call it effective ways, whether it's actually in product innovation or process innovation. So as long as you do not reveal, you not really disclose your innovation to others, and people not pretty sure how they're going to what we call it business re-engineering. That means some of the companies, what they did, they're going to actually buy your product, and then they're going to make what we call it investigation. They're going to look how it works. So from that, they learn about your technology, and eventually they're going to introduce a new technology that's better than your product. Okay. In order for us to avoid this kind of things, first of all, this is one of the key aspects that we're going to use: controlling key resources. Okay, controlling key resources is most effective when resources are rare and arrival good. Okay, so this is where it keeps it from being used by 2 companies simultaneously. Okay, when we talk about key resources, you need to understand at certain company or business, they have several kind of key resources. So that means every sectors or every kind of business, they might have different kind of key resources. For example, when we talk about if you actually go into this kind of what we call it, as simple as give you like pineapple tart. Okay, pineapple tart for example. Okay, you want to sell pineapple tart di Hari Raya kan, Hari Raya pineapple tart, tak nenas. So what basically the key resources that you think that you need to control, for example? Guys? Hello?
The quality of pineapples.
Yes, that's actually the outcome, Hazel, but we actually talking the resources. If you want to produce this kind of pineapple tart, what would be the main resources that you need?
Pineapple.
Pineapple. Okay, that's an example of pineapple, as simple as pineapple. So that means perhaps one of the key aspects that you can control when it comes to the production of your product is actually the main resources pineapple. Okay, this is I give you a simple analogy, or perhaps when it comes to the what we call it production of certain what we call it products. So you need to control that key resources. Okay, for example, macam we want to make ice cream. So what basically the key resources that we need to control? So as simple as you want to introduce like rice, macam beras. Okay, this is actually controlled by the government. So having said that, some of the aspect we want to see in terms of the key resources needed, but some of it perhaps we want to see how we're going to operate this. For example, like we must get license. Okay, For instance, when it comes to the offering the 5G services or 4G, that means the network for our telecommunication in the country is totally controlled by the government. Okay, so that means you need to get the license. So having said that, whoever that get the license from the government, so that means they control the key resources. As simple as when we talk about Petronas. So basically they control the key resources. They are the one that be entrusted by the government to do this kind of business in Malaysia. And then many of the downstream, that means the oil basically being owned by them, okay, by them under this kind of government regulation lah, okay. So that means they control this kind of key resources, okay. So that's actually to give to you the resources doesn't mean reflecting just only the raw material or key resources, but also to what extent you control the key aspect. For example, maybe when we talk about manpower, yes, it can become the key resources as well. Okay, you actually have the core scientists or perhaps the core R&D or innovators. So that means you control them. Okay, so controlling these key resources definitely might prevent the imitators or other companies to introduce new product that become your competition lah. Okay. Okay, so that's actually the first aspect. This is another aspect. Ni saya bagi contoh dekat sini lah. By controlling the sources of supply or star, a non-plant, so a key raw ingredient in production of medication, Tamiflu. Okay, so this is actually one to show to you. For example, if you look here, by actually controlling this kind of things, so the pharmaceutical company able to control the market. Okay, so that means when you actually able to control the key aspect or key resources in producing the product or delivering the product to the respected customers, that means you can simply deter the imitation. Okay, so that's actually the first aspect when it comes to the non-legal barriers to appropriate investment in innovations. Secondly, is establishing a reputation. Okay, guys, so this is another important aspect. Reputation matters more industries than serve consumer than industry that serve businesses. Okay, so having said that, first of all, reputation is very important, particularly if you running your business in the what we call it fast-growing consumer market. Okay, because people want to see who's the one that actually produce the product. People actually might be convinced, even though sometimes, okay, what you produce is not really your core business, but since you have this kind of business, you have this kind of what we call it brand, okay, behind it, so people might be persuaded that, oh, this is what we call it a very good kind of product, okay. For example, when Microsoft introduced Xbox, we know that, okay, Microsoft is not actually the what we call it the main producer for console game punya product. Okay, however, some people would say that, oh, it's okay for us to buy Xbox simply because Xbox basically produced by Microsoft. So that means the reputation that Microsoft have would influence the customers to buy the product. Okay, so by building a reputation, companies can attract customers more easily and keep them from shifting suppliers. And brand names are more effective at appropriating the return to investment innovation industry that serve consumer, particularly those are strongly affected by perceptions. Okay. Another aspect, for example, currently when we talk about hospitality, hotel, okay, as you can see that certain hotel they have certain standard, but in order for them to what we call it introduce new hotel chain, so basically they try to actually use this kind of brand name. For example, macam DoubleTree by Hilton. So as we know that Hilton one of the most reputable what we call it hotel brand, okay, from the customer perspective, but they actually want to normally for the Hilton hotel ni berapa dia punya star is normally 5 star and above, betul? But in order for Hilton to introduce a hotel that actually just below than 5 star, so that means they need to come up with a reputation macam below than that lah macam DoubleTree. So DoubleTree by Hilton. So people actually might still perceive, oh, it's okay, this is going to be a good hotel. Okay, even though the standard is basically not really 5-star. Okay, but Hilton at the same time, they need to preserve their quality. They cannot actually simply use the Hilton hotel uh, for the hotel for the hotel that below 4-star or 3-star. You got it? So eventually they need to come up with a new brand. Sama juga macam Huawei. As we know that Huawei basically have another brand owner, right? So that's actually how they want to preserve and have this kind of reputation. Okay, so customer might be feel okay. It's okay. We can simply go for Honor. It's actually more affordable, and more or less it's actually produced or perhaps under the company of Huawei. That's actually an example. People might be persuaded to buy your product because of the brand. Okay, so that's an example. Okay, and then another aspect is obtaining architectural control. So architectural control allows firms to limit compatibility of their product to companies that are not competitive threat. Okay, to buy compatibility their own product and to control the time and pace of the product improvement. Okay, the what we call it the most obvious example of this, for example, like Microsoft. Okay, so they try to actually make sure that whatever software that they produce is actually compatible with their software. You got it? Okay, or perhaps they're going to have this kind of what we call it discussion with the computer company, hardware computer company, make sure that whenever they produce a product is compatible with them, or perhaps whenever the software companies, for example, design company, or perhaps apa nama dia, video company that come up with this kind of software, editing software. So video editing software, for example, they must make sure that it's actually in line with their software, because Microsoft basically produce an operating system. So having said that, they're going to convince other people to make sure that whenever they produce this kind of supplementary software, is going to be compatible with their software. That's actually another example, because people actually might what we call it use this product because of compatibility. Eventually, like Huawei, lah, for example, currently some of the people might actually hesitate or perhaps do not want to buy Huawei simply because it's not really compatible with Android. Okay, and then it's only have one segment, which is Hongmeng Huawei Gallery, for example. So that's the reason why one of the things that you need to understand in terms of the compatibility, that means to the extent you're obtaining architectural control. Okay, and then another aspect, we also look in terms of the learning curve. Okay, so learning curve, to put it in the simplest perspective, is to what extent basically you adopt or embrace with this kind of learning activities. That means I would say like R&D, and then maybe brainstorming a new product, okay, and then learning about the customer. So all of that basically might be involved with the knowledge-based organization. So this is something that perhaps we need to understand when it comes to the technological company or even a normal company. They always need to learn. They always need to learn, okay, in order for them to embrace with the new technology. Okay, so the ability to learn and then use a new technique definitely might increase the effectiveness of their production, as well as the innovativeness of their product. Okay. And then the next part is exploiting economy of scale. I think we already discussed this so many times. So this is referring to the reduction in unit that occurs as production volume increase. So like I mentioned just now, if you buy Kueh Raya, if you buy cookies from manufacturing companies, definitely the price might be lower. But if you actually buy cookies from those handmade small business operators, the price might be higher simply because of the what we call it, the cost actually involved might be different. Okay, so by exploiting economy of scale, companies can reduce the cost to less than those of their competitors and make entry by other firm unprofitable. So this is another aspect. Perhaps that's the reason why as a small business operator, most probably you're going to focus on certain companies only. Okay, for example, kita selalu nampak, okay, those what we call it designer lah contohnya. You might actually know that sometimes designer they know that they cannot compete with the big brand. Okay, for example like Zara, what else? Kalau kita cakap designer ni, apa contoh bag? Kalau bag apa designer dia, kasut ke? Contoh?
Oh, I don't know.
Guys, kalau contoh, hello? Okay, handbag. Apa contoh what we call it, the premium handbag, branded handbag. When we talk about handbag, guys. Hello? Hello pula. Sekejap. Okay, okay. Yes, Prada, you're going to say channel. Is it how to pronounce it? Chanel, bukan Chanel. Okay, Prada, LV. Okay, so all of this basically we know is a branded kind of handbag. Am I right? Okay, for example, if you want to buy LV, so basically the price for the normal handbag is cost about more than 10,000. The what we call it, even the simple LV handbag, basically the cost is about 7,000 to 8,000 ringgit. So it's very expensive. So if you want to embark yourself into this kind of business, how are you going to compete with this one? And then some of the Malaysia designer basically they come up with this product juga lah. Okay. Christy Ng, Anissa, Christy Ng ni local ke apa? Anissa Izwanis.
Local, Doctor.
Itulah, saya rasa saya macam ada nampak. Okay, dia Malaysian kan?
Yes.
Okay, saya rasa dia baru up. I think she's actually in the business about 10 years lah. Betul? Okay, Christine.
Betul, Doctor.
Okay, sebab saya ada dengar dia punya talk lah. Basically, yeah, Christine Ng. Okay, for example, so even I think I basically ada dengar kot dia punya talk. Okay, so basically she started the business by using Facebook, Instagram, and then she's trying to cater with certain people, and then after that, people started to actually appreciate the product lah. Okay, dia ada jual bag, ada stuff lah juga. Okay, so when we talk about this, so definitely you cannot actually compete with LV. LV basically all over the world. And kalau kita cakap LV ni, kalau you tahulah macam LV ni macam mana pun dia tak akan buat sales. Okay, I'm not pretty sure, but LV normally they tak akan buat sales. Even though during Boxing Day, which is a day after Christmas, normally many of the branded or many of the shopping outlet all over the world, they will actually do this kind of promotion, discounted price, but LV will never actually reduce the price. This is one of the ways they want to preserve their prestigious, this brand. Okay, so contohnya lah, okay. Chanel ni pun sama juga, dia ada dia punya classic handbag yang dah lama. Okay, so siapa nama dia, Coco Chanel kot, dia punya designer tu. So basically if you look here, okay, so they try to preserve this kind of thing. Sama juga macam Salvatore Ferragamo, kalau you pergi dekat mana nama ni, if you go to JTO lah, as simple as if you go to JPO, you can see this kind of brand. Okay, it's very expensive. Kalau kita nak masuk pun orang tengok atas bawah, mampu tak mampu beli. So that's actually what we talk about the brand as well as economy of scale lah. So basically for the newcomers, they cannot simply go into that, and that's the reason why they need to compete at other kind of aspect. Okay, so moving up the learning curve, so by moving up the learning curve, companies make more efficient at making the product and develop product features that competitors cannot match. And learning curve advantages exist only if learning is proprietary and firm are good at learning. So again, this is actually we're talking into more to what extent how fast basically can you learn. Okay, so that's why sometimes the moment you embark into the business, one of the key aspects as we discussed in chapter 6 with regard to the lead time for the production activities. Okay, so we actually must make sure that we can make it efficiently. So that means we can reduce the resources. We can actually minimize the resources in terms of the time, in terms of the money, in terms of the raw material use. All of these basically need to be involved with this kind of learning activities. Okay, so you need to learn. You need to always learn. You always actually ask your employees to learn new things in order to, what we call it, in order to make sure that you we come up with the efficient processes. Okay. Okay, so we go next. So this is quite common, exploiting a first mover advantage. Again, which actually reflecting the lead time. So the advantage that accrues to a company from being the first to enter the market. But we actually already discussed. Not every time, basically, the first mover can get this kind of advantages. Undeniably, there should be some kind of advantages that you receive, but perhaps some of the things might incur some cost because you are the first in the market. You need to establish so many things. For example, the SOP and then the processes. You need to do the experiment. You are the one that basically might need to go through this kind of obstacle and challenges first, and then need to pay some cost as well. And then the moment you go into the business, and the imitators can simply copycat, can simply follow your step in the easiest way. Okay, so effort result in higher market share and higher profit than late entrance. Okay, so that's the reason why many companies, they want to make sure that they are the first one that introduced to the market due to the two main reasons. The first one is actually due to the lead time. The second one is basically reputation. Because the moment you become the first, you're going to say that we are the first in the business. Okay, we are the first that introduced the product. We are the most advanced company. Okay, so that's why many companies they actually aiming to be the first. Okay, because of they want to, what we call it, control the market share due to the lead time that they have, and secondly, they want to build up the reputation. Okay, so when you become the first mover, so it's definitely help to appropriate the return to investment in several ways. Like I mentioned just now, obtain control over key resources, because you are the one in the business. You know what are the main resources needed. Okay, and then target the best customers in the market. Yes, because you are the first in the what we call it, industry, in the sectors. So definitely you are the one that make the market study first. You know who are the customers, you know the preferences. Okay, and then you can also exploit switching costs or the cost to customers of changing suppliers or perhaps changing the product. For example, if you're the first in the market, so it might take some time for the customers to buy a new product or to change it due to their what we call it, due to their engagement with your product first. Okay, and then they already bought it, they already actually pay some money. Definitely it will take some time, unless if they are damn rich customers, they want to buy more products. Okay, so that's actually the most advantages that you have if you become the first mover. And the late mover advantage, many late mover has been more successful than early movers. This is actually we're talking from the perspective of imitators. So that means you just simply follow the action or step taken by the first mover. So what will be the benefit that you will get? First, benefit from the investment that first mover made in creating supply infrastructure and distribution channel. As I mentioned just now, becoming the first mover, definitely you are the one that needs to establish so many things. For example, you are the one that need to create the infrastructure, and then you are the one that create the distribution channel. So all of this actually being established by you. So what the benefit of becoming the imitators or late movers? You simply follow the action that has been proven successful by the first mover. So you do not need to make some kind of additional effort or investment to construct this. Okay, and can design product. Hello, do you have any question? Okay, can design product that correct the mistake that the first mover has made in meeting customer needs. So that means you learn the mistake made by the first mover, and then leapfrog ahead of the first mover technology. Leapfrog, that means you actually introduce something that better than the first mover. So by learning whatever that has been proposed by them, and then you want to actually add values, okay? So that means customer might actually change to you, okay? And then what else? Adik, yes, Adik. Please proceed. With your question.
Doctor,
Yes.
I mean, like, what about in terms of the profit or something? Won't the first mover gain more money than, because when something is new, people tend to buy it more than something like that. Maybe just some
Betul juga sih,
few
profit
corrections
juga
or something like
pengaruh
that.
juga sih sebenarnya.
I think that's different this slide. Okay, this is the first slide. Okay. So how basically first move make money, because they are the one that actually first in the market, they can simply target the customer first. So that means, for example, when we talk about vaccine, okay, this is quite interesting lah. Okay, as we know that Pfizer vaccine come first, and people, and then when they come first, and then many countries already embarked to buy from Pfizer, and they actually can use that money to make sure that what we call it, they can improve, okay, they can improve this kind of vaccine. So that's example. So that's the reason why it's quite interesting lah when we talk about vaccine, because all this while we know and understood that vaccine might take some times. But when it comes to this, every company's first is actually maybe because of advancements of technology, and secondly, due to the serious need of having the vaccine. So that's the reason why it's become the pandemic. Kalau kita lihat dekat sini, for example, like HIV vaccine is still actually under trial for so many years, but coronavirus vaccine already in place and already been commercialized. So that's actually something that need to be questioned lah. Kenapa, why HIV vaccine it takes so long? Okay, because most probably the what we call it the need is not really serious needed lah. Sorry, one more minute. Sorry, saya ada call. Okay, sorry, ada disturbance sedikit. Okay, so I'm sorry. Okay, back to the Sunny questions. How the first mover make profit? Definitely, some of the first mover they make profit. Okay, but they can actually make profit if they actually, able to control the key resources and then understand who are the customers, and they also have what we call it protection. The IP or the patent that they have totally protecting themselves. Okay, so that's actually how they make money. But not all the time, basically, first mover can get profit. So that's the reason why we go to the next aspect. Okay, which is late mover. So I definitely refer to this as followers. So that means all the imitators. Okay, the last point that I explained with regard to leapfrog, that means when imitators basically can produce a better product than your product or innovations, and the benefit from investment in research and development that first mover has made. So you must remember, perhaps first mover can actually make money because they become the first, but they are the one that actually need to spend a lot of money. So that means before the first mover can get the ROI, So most probably another company comes in. So definitely the profit margin is quite lower because they need to spend more in order to do R&D compared than the imitators, because imitators just simply follow. They do not have the capacity, or perhaps they don't really go into this kind of R&D activities. And entry to the market is often better time to take advantage to the development of complementary technology. So this is another aspect perhaps we want to look at. Okay, for example, when imitators come into picture, customer already familiar with this kind of product. Okay, so that means they actually the imitators can simply understand the preferences of the customers, and at the same time the company already come up with the complementary product or technology that support this kind of technology. Okay, for example, when we talk about phone, mesti ada complementary product. Okay, so that's actually depending on what we call it, the action and reaction. That's why we actually want to understand as a technology strategist or technopreneurs. Okay, you must actually have this kind of study whether you is more advantageous. Okay, if you become the imitators, or it's actually more advantageous if you become innovator. So having said that, the context like two aspects. Whether you become imitators or innovators. Innovators, I simply refer to the first mover, and imitators. Imitators is the late mover. Okay. Okay. So this is an example whereby not every first mover can actually become successful companies. Like we mentioned here, successful companies, okay, were not the first mover. If you look here, they give some example. Okay, for example, like mainframe computer, the first mover is not IBM. Okay, okay, it's actually Atomsoft ABC computer. This give example. But the most successful one is IBM, for example. Spreadsheet, for example. Okay, the first mover, if you look here, basically we see calculation code. Okay, and then Microsoft basically the one that come up with this kind of spreadsheet, or Microsoft Excel. Okay, web browser, Netscape become the first mover, and then Microsoft comes in, and perhaps right now Google lah contohnya. Okay. Okay, video camera, as we know, Kodak, basically the first mover, but Sony become the successful company. So having said that, not every first mover basically can retain their position as the most successful companies in that particular sectors. Because we need to aware the reaction as well as competition made by the competitors. Okay, the main question that I actually want you to think of whether it's good for you to become the first mover or late mover. That's depending on certain aspects. First mover do better in industries where so product and services are expensive, cannot valued easily prior to purchase, are durable and infrequently purchased. Okay, so that means if you look here, point number one, we actually position our product as premium product. Okay, so because premium product definitely they targeting certain niche market. Okay, so for example, when we talk about Virtu, I always actually give the example of Virtu, right? So kita dah pernah discuss kan, I already mentioned to you about Virtu phone. Okay, which is if you look here, the price of Virtu phone basically up to how many ringgit? 30,000 ringgit. Okay, it's very expensive, but they actually can still survive in the market. Okay, and perhaps another aspect lah. Okay, perhaps I want to ask you right now, do you think that those what we call it branded or handmade hand watch, or what we call it watchmaker watch lah, maker watch, okay, for example like Rolex, can still sustain even though currently smartwatch already in place? Okay, this is class discussion. I want to get feedback from you, even I still not think it deeply. As you might aware, recently, people are actually go use smartwatch. Am I right? So do you think that smartwatch like premium watch like Rolex can still sustain? Okay. Do you think that it can still sustain? Okay, Christopher, could you elaborate?
Maybe, doctor, those premium watch they target for higher income customer market. So
Okay.
they can sustain niche market, what I mean, doctor.
Okay, Chris, any other opinion? Do you think that Rolex can still sustain its business, though there are so many watches, there are so many watch brands,
You see?
especially smartwatch already in the market?
Because it's
Anyone?
lame. It's so lame today.
Hello? Class discussion. Okay, saya bagi awak, I give you 2 minutes to think of and I will be back. Boleh? 2 minutes. Okay, 2 minutes to think whether Rolex can still sustain. This is very ad hoc kind of question, even though we have so many kind of question. Okay, I give you like 2 minutes, not only yes or no. I want you to elaborate and critically explain. Boleh, Sadiq? Okay, can you do that? Okay, I give you like 1 or 2 minutes to think this kind of thing, and after this, I'm going to ask you randomly. Okay, so 2 minutes from now to think of. Okay. I want to get opinion from Aina Irdina. Semua buka kamera. Class discussion. Every one of you here, please open your camera. Iza, Akma, Naziha, Rifat, Arfan, Fazli, Riwe, Sadiq, Sri Putri. Saya nak tengok makin tembam ke tak lepas raya ni. Saya berat saya naik ya. Saya raya rumah memang tak keluar. I just actually saya kat rumah dengan mak saya 2 orang, makan tidur. And then I just actually weighing my weight. This morning berat saya naik 1 kilo, 2 kilo. Ayo. Okay. So I want to get opinion. Fazli lah, lama tak dengar suara Fazli. Rindu suara merdu Fazli. Fazli, do you think that Rolex can sustain the business?
I think yes. I have the same answer as Christopher. Because
Yes, elaborate. Why?
because I think Rolex has their own target customer.
Okay, lagi.
And
Critical, be more critical. Why? Why Rolex have target customer? Why customers still want to buy Rolex? It's very
Because I
expensive.
think,
Rolex is cost you about 100,000, 150,000, 80,000. So why people want to actually, buy this kind of watches, even though it's very expensive?
because I think Rolex has their own design that their customer want.
Okay.
And they don't mind the technology of the smartwatch.
Okay, tak apa. Atika. Cantik Atika punya background tu. Ni Atikah mana ni? Atikah G3.
Saya ke?
Awak lah yang betulkan tudung tu.
Okay, for me, I think Rolex bukan untuk orang-orang yang prefer branded goods. Kan, mungkin untuk orang yang ada high income, like minister kebanyakannya guna jam-jam yang mahal, tak guna jam-jam like macam digital semua tu, jarang tengok. For example, apa tu yang Johor punya apa tu, TMJ. Dia prefer untuk semua barang branded. Tak adanya guna jam-jam like macam Apple semua tu, tak ada.
Yelah. Okay, so very good. Okay, so some people, they actually wearing that not because of course, definitely. I just want to ask you, is it any different if you actually buy what we call it Swatch, right? Swatch, another brand, buy Swatch, as well as if you use Rolex and you use Casio. Is it any different in terms of time? No, the time is actually similar regardless what watches that you actually use. But when it comes to the Rolex, definitely they actually have some kind of prestige, the brand. So all the datuk, for example, those rich people, definitely they're going to buy that because of this is their status. You got it? Okay. And for them, if they want to buy Apple Watch, they want to buy other watches lah, for example, sport watch for example, they can still buy it. They will use, for example, saya ada tengok, saya observe lah orang tu. Dia kalau pergi kerja, dia akan pakai jam yang branded lah. Okay, tapi kalau dia actually, dia actually go for sport, dia akan tukar jam. And then they have like, saya tak ada lah, but I have actually seen few of my friends yang kaya raya, definitely bukan my circle of friends, tapi kan kadang-kadang diorang ni kan suka show off, kan? So basically they have this kind of watch box. So ada satu box tu, they actually combine all the watches. So this is actually, when we talk about this, yes, okay, there are certain business is not much affected by that because of the reputation made by the businesses. Okay, boleh punya kamera sekarang. Okay, so saya nak continue and advertising intensive industries in which customer learn very little and very slowly about new product. Okay, so that means whoever that comes first, definitely buyers will buy from it. Okay, product requires distributor to hold large stock, additional part or computer product to satisfy the need of end users. So this is where become the first, you already establish this kind of distributor and then you already control all the network. Okay, that's why it's actually related with number 4. Network externalities exist and pattern are more effective. That means you already established the pattern. People not simply imitate your product. You can simply sue them. Okay, and economy of scale are very large. So this is some of the condition that would help you to gain advantage if you become the first mover. Okay. However, there are certain aspect. Sorry. Okay. Dah habis dah. Okay. Dah habis. That means this is actually the summary. Some of the aspect that you actually can do with regard to non-legal barriers to appropriability of your innovation investment. Okay, control over resources, economy of scale, reputation, learning curve, first mover advantage, and architectural control. Okay, and then we actually will go to the TIS model. Okay, TIS model is actually like a decision-making model where you should be an imitators and where you should be an innovators. So this is based on the idea that imitators are more successful than innovators when innovation are easy to imitate. Okay, so that means you must take into consideration several aspects. 3 aspects here lah, if they put here. The first one is imitation easiness. Okay, secondly, dominant design has emerged in an industry. So dominant design, that means to what extent certain standard need to be followed. So that's the reason why this is chapter 10, chapter 11. We are actually I already discussed chapter 11 about competitive advantage. And then chapter 12, there's one chapter with regard to technical standard, okay? Which is, we refer to the dominant design has emerged, okay? So this is where we want to look whether dominant design has emerged or not. Sometimes it's more preferable if dominant design has emerged. So that means you can easily imitate. That's actually the standard preferred by the customers. So having said that, okay, as the imitators, you can simply imitate and make a leapfrog. That means you can do it better than the previous companies. Okay, and then imitators control the key complementary asset in the industry. So this is another aspect. To what extent you control key complementary asset, which is the upstream or downstream asset that are used to develop produce and distribute innovative new product or service. Okay, so that means if you already control this kind of downstream and upstream level, for example, the distribution channel, so you have control the distribution of it. So that means it will be easily you can actually be an imitator. We're going to look in terms of that. Okay, this is how this model look like. The first aspect, before you're going to decide whether you want to become innovators and imitators, look at this. Okay, first consideration is actually to what extent the pattern or IP is very strong in that particular product or industry. Okay. Okay, so this is where if you look here, if there is a strong pattern, so that means it's very difficult for you to penetrate into the market because of the protection made by the incumbent company, okay, by the established company. So that means it's good if you actually just simply back off and go for another business rather than you want to proceed as imitators, okay. Definitely if you have strong patterns, so this is where it's good for you to become innovators, okay, because you have something that going to protect you, give you more advantages and benefit, okay. But if the weak pattern or trade secret, this is where you can proceed and go to the next question, okay. So this is where we look in terms of dominant design. As I mentioned just now, okay, if dominant design is basically already emerged, you can actually proceed because you already know this is actually the most acceptable standard in the industry or preferred by the customers. So that means you can simply imitate. But if there is no dominant design, so it's very difficult for you to get imitators because you're not pretty sure who you want to follow. Okay, so if look here, if no dominant design, you just stop your position as the imitators. Okay, and then another part is actually after you already know there's dominant design, so this is where you also look in terms of the complementary assets. Okay, so whether it's generic or specialized. So if generic, so its contact value chain is specialized. So this is another aspect you need to acquire the value chain. So that means to what extent you're able to control that position. If generic, that means it's easy for you to actually come up with the value with control with this kind of activities. Okay. So having said that, this model basically, first of all, they look into more, is it difficult to imitate or not? In industry in which imitation are difficult to imitate, innovators tend to capture the return to innovation. So it's very difficult. Sometimes the imitation is not about the design of the product. Sometimes it also refers to the cost. Okay, for the imitators to imitate this kind of technology, they need to get access to the resources that very costly. They need to hire programmers that very costly. They need to actually buy the machine that very complicated to operate. So that's actually when it comes to the context of difficulty to imitate a certain technology or product. Okay, so having said that, innovators might have more advantages. Okay, so as imitators, if you look that very difficult to imitate, so most probably you're going to stop. But nowadays, this is something that perhaps we want to look at. Okay, when we talk about technological product, especially, so I believe that it's very challenging. Am I right? Sekarang ni banyak benda basically we can imitate. Am I right, guys? Okay, everything basically can be simply what we call it. This is what we call it reverse re-engineering. Okay, business reverse re-engineering. That means people simply buy the first mover product or technology, and after that they learn from it, and after that they're going to introduce a better product. Okay, so that's why the next aspect we look into more of this as well. Okay, industry in which new product and services are easy to imitate and domination has not yet been established. Innovators' success depend on their ability to make their technology the dominant design. Okay, again, if there is no technical standard or dominant design emerge, so innovators might actually, or innovators together with imitators need to compete. Which one that could be the, what we call it, established as the dominant design. That may which of the companies that able to come up with the dominant design will win this kind of competition. Okay, and then another part that I mentioned just now, we also look in terms of the complementary assets. So industry in which new product and services are easy to imitate and the design has been established. Innovator success depend on control of complementary assets. So as we mentioned, there are two types of complementary asset: generic, so you do not need to modify to fit the innovation, and specialized. For example, like if you become imitators, you need to modify whatever that has been established. You need to acquire some kind of things in order for you to have access to this kind of complementary assets. So when innovators do not control specialized complementary assets, intellectual property is weak and the winning design exists. Being imitators is better strategy than being an innovators. Okay. New firm typically cannot adopt an imitation strategy, making their success dependent on the effectiveness of their innovation strategy. Okay. So if you look here, the point is very important for you to apply what we call as this model here. Okay. So how and when and especially in which situation you should be an innovation, in which situation you should be an innovator, totally depending on this aspect. First, how strong the pattern, or perhaps to what extent is very difficult for you to imitate, okay, based on the pattern as well as other aspect. And then we also want to look in terms of complementary asset. This is where before we go into complementary asset, we want to look with regard to the dominant design, whether it's already established or not. And then after that, we look in terms of complementary asset. This is what this model all about, okay? To summarize this, so this is actually the key point here, okay? When you become the imitators and when you become the innovators. If you look here, pattern and trade secret are not effective. So this is where when you become the imitators. Kalau benda tu is not really effective, especially the pattern, so this is where you can have the chances to become the imitators. Okay, or dominant design exists, and because you can simply follow whatever that has been taken place and established, and perhaps you can make it better. And then complementary assets are important and specialized. Okay, so this is where perhaps when we look in terms of the complementary asset is very important. So you actually can simply follow and acquire that kind of things. However, you become the innovators when pattern and trade secret are effective or dominant design does not exist and complementary assets are unimportant and generic. So that means you can simply actually have the room to become the leader and innovators. Okay, so that's actually most important part for these chapters. This is very important because this chapter focusing on two aspects. The first aspect, we want to see to what extent the company should use other kind of strategies other than the legal barriers strategies such as patent, copyright, trademark to protect their innovations. Okay, we already discussed that. There are a few aspects, for example, controlling key resources, kind of scale movement of learning curve, reputation of turning architectural control as well as become the first mover. And the second aspect of this chapter, which is number 9, so this is where we actually using the TEAS model to identify whether we should be an innovators and imitators. Okay, so I think that's all for this chapter. Any questions? 11:46. Any questions? So I just wondering, okay, how many of you here actually at the campus? Siapa sih dekat campus? Chris, are you at the campus right now?
Yes, doctor. I'm in the campus, doctor.
Okay, so which college are you?
KDOJ.
KDOJ. So you tak boleh keluar lah.
Tak boleh keluar.
It's a total lockdown
Ya, total lockdown, doctor.
at UTM. Okay, total lockdown. Semalam saya kat office. I went to my office yesterday. So the moment I received his total lockdown, I bring all my stuff. Okay. Okay, so besides Chris, any one of you here basically staying at the campus right now?
Arif.
Saya doktor.
Apa kamu?
Arif doktor.
Apa?
Saya dekat.
Oh, Arif Kurniawan. Kamu di campus. Okay. Okay. I hope that you please take care because Arif dekat campus mana? Which campus are you? Sadik saya.
KDOJ doktor. Sama dengan Christopher.
KDOJ. Sadik also at the campus. Which campus are you? Wow, ramainya. Really. Please take care of yourself, okay? Because there is outbreak at UTM. That's why this is quite interesting. Like eventually, when the outbreak happened, so we actually just we want to actually jaga nama UTM. Meanwhile, when the cluster happened, we just put cluster Jalan Lingkaran Ilmu. If you remember, kan? Okay, cluster Jalan Lingkaran Ilmu. We don't reveal UTM names. And then yesterday, satu Malaysia kenal UTM. Am I right? Okay, many people basically WhatsApp me asking me, yes, I'm okay. Okay, so everyone, please take care of yourself. Has decided everything should be conducted through online. Semua sekali sekarang ni. Everything online, even our examination through online ni. I memang dah semata-mata lah online. Okay, so everything basically should be conducted online. But I really hope that you take care of yourself. Because right now, like yesterday, the number of people who are positive in Malaysia dah cecah 6,000 per day. So it's quite alarming things. I believe that many of us basically, affected by this lah. Okay, so I think that's all for this week. You guys can still continue. I think by next week I can start actually focusing on final exam because I'm going to finalize the final exam question by this week. So hopefully by next week I already know what kind of question going to be asked. Okay. Okay, so I think that's all for now. Any questions so far, everyone? Do you have any question?
Doctor,
Yes, Riwi?
I would like to ask that is there any guideline for us to follow for our group project? Like what should we include in the
For the group project, so basically, am I already share with you the course information dah ada kan? On the course information, yeah, it's very general. The course information, that means the flow, what actually the content going to be accessed, going to be accessed. So you actually just flow this kind of content. So that means, for example, okay, let me try to recap. For your assignment, there should be like 3 main assignment. Dia pecah-pecah tapi satu assignment yang sama. Okay, the first assignment is actually, I'm going to call it as case study. Okay, for the case study, definitely you need to give the background of the case. Okay, the background of the first background of the company, background of the case, and after that, issues and challenges. That's it. Okay, so that's actually for the case. You need to separate the document. The second document, again, this is actually the consultancy project. So for the consultancy project, so basically what I'm going to look at again is actually based on the cases given. Based on the cases that you develop, you might actually try to summarize that, and then immediately you're going to give like 3 solutions based on the issues and challenges that you identify in the case study. So having said that, Riwe and everyone, there should be like 2 documents plus 1 presentation document. Okay. For the presentation, you might actually mix. That means you make the flow from the background of the company, background of the case, and then the issues and challenges, and followed by a recommendation. However, there are 2 separate other document reports. I'm going to say report. The first report, case study. Okay, so I believe that I have mentioned to you, you need to identify 3 issues. Am I right? Betul kan? Guys? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And then on the project, on the consultancy project report, you actually need to come up with the 3 practical yet critical recommendation. How the company going to identify those challenges? You got it? Okay? So that's actually the standard way that I expect. But there's no standard way because there's no standard format. Up to you how you're going to write it, because you need to use Canva in order to present the report, write the report. Got it? Riwe, am I answering your question?
Yes, I got it. Thank you, Doctor.
No worries. Okay. Okay, I think that's all for today, everyone. So sekarang ni saya nak share semula attendance. For those who has kind of attendance, you might leave the session right now. Have a good day and take care, everyone. For those yang belum scan, please scan it now. Okay, goodbye everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Doctor.
Doctor.
No worries.
Take care,
Thank you,
Doctor.
Doctor.